My childhood delinquent career was a real ball. You know, it was an exciting adventure to me. I was a delinquent not because I was forced to, I was a delinquent because I wanted to be one. You know, all of these things.
It was your idea of being good, as you say in the book somewhere. They kept telling you to be good, and this is the way you knew how to be good, was to be good at stealing.
I was enjoying life as I came, and many of the...
The young man speaking back in 1966 is the great writer Claude Brown. I'm David Hoffman, filmmaker, and I got the chance to interview Claude Brown in 1989. But this scene that you've just seen a piece of, and that I'm going to show you the whole interview of, is from 1966. Claude Brown was an amazing guy. I mean, he grew up in Harlem. His parents were sharecroppers in the South. They came north to Harlem, New York City, hopefully for a better life. And their kid, Claude, got involved in gangs, drugs, robberies. He became a con man, really rough guy. And as you'll hear in the interview, he liked it. His parents, who had these high hopes for him, send him back to South Carolina, hoping he'll kind of get straight. He doesn't. He comes back to Harlem, and he's doing the same thing again. And he gets sent to, we all know this in New York, the Wiltwick School for Boys. Really rough place, where the really bad guys get sent. And there, he runs across a professor who teaches him how to write, and more importantly, teaches him how to think. And Claude Brown is clearly a brilliant guy. So he gets out of the Wiltwick School. You'd hope he'd do better. He doesn't. He gets shot in the stomach. His brother becomes a horrible drug addict. And finally, he decides to leave Harlem and go to New York City's Greenwich Village. That's where the writers are, the artists are. That's where the creative people are. Totally different universe from Harlem. And in Greenwich Village, he writes Manchild and the Promised Land, a book that really shook up America, shook up a lot of black people. It's part of African American studies for sure. An important book about his early life in Harlem. So you're about to see the interview that was conducted 1 year after he wrote this book, when he's still not sure that Harlem ain't the place to be. I'm going to tell you at the very end, if you get through this, what happened to me when I interviewed him in 1989.
My childhood delinquent career was a real ball. You know, it was an exciting adventure to me. I was a delinquent not because I was forced to, I was a delinquent because I wanted to be one. You know, all of these things.
It was your idea of being good, as you say in the book somewhere. They kept telling you to be good, and this is the way you knew how to be good, was to be good at stealing.
I was enjoying life as I came, and many of the people I came up with were enjoying life also. They were enjoying taking drugs. They were enjoying shooting each other. They were enjoying the gang fights. We all enjoyed it. It was a ball. It gave us a sort of social status, and we enjoyed stealing.
You were making a rep all the time, as you put it, reputation for being tough.
Yeah, this was meaningful to us in life, and it was perhaps the most meaningful experience available to us at the time. But many of the other guys with whom I came up weren't able to perceive it was time to stop playing here and now. You know, if I'd gone to Coxsackie, I would have had a criminal record which would have presented an obstacle in the way of my advancement, economic and social advancement for the rest of my life. And this was the time when I had to make a choice. I had to find a way to avoid going on along the roster of the New York State penal institutions. You know, like I would have gone to Coxsackie, Elmira, Auburn, Dannemora, Sing Sing, and eventually Attica, perhaps. Or if I didn't make the electric, Attica is the top security prison in New York.
So at the age of 16, you just decided that was it. You'd had your sort of childish fun and games, and if you didn't cut it right there, you'd be through for life.
That's right. At 16, the party was over.
Yeah, but what did you didn't have any specific ambitions at 16, though, when you talk about economic and social advance. A lot of people who talk about
I knew I wanted to make money. I wanted to make money, and I didn't want to spend too much time in jail in the process of making this money.
Say right now, we go out on these streets, and there's 16-year-old kids walking around. Do they have any feeling that there are chances for them, that they can make it big in the world?
Well, I didn't have any feeling that there were chances for me, but I knew it was out there somewhere, and I had to get it.
You had to get it, you yourself, by yourself.
That's right.
And it didn't really occur to you that being a Negro was going to, well, obviously occurred to you it was going to make it difficult, but it didn't occur to you to make it impossible. as a kid? Did it occur to any of your friends that it was impossible for them?
No, I don't think we thought too much about it. We knew what we wanted, and we were so involved in our problems that we never gave too much thought to the social and, you know, economic restraints on us.
Yeah.
All we knew is that we had to get it, and we wanted to get it then and there, you know?
In some way. Well, like all kids.
I live in Harlem now. I've lived in Harlem all my life. I've never tried to be white. I've never had any desire to be white, and
You think
I
Martin
still
Luther
know
King
the
has a
people. I
desire to
still
be
know
white?
the people on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still speak to them in argot. There are very few people around here that know me by Claude Brown.
Sonny.
If they went, yeah, you know, it's still Sonny Boy, and that's fine with me, you know. And I know them by, well, whatever their nicknames are. We grew up together. I still feel as though I'm an integral part of the Harlem community.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the home. The statistics, I know you hate statistics and you hate social science and all that sort of thing, but there's a certain crude truth in these reports. Recently, a report on the Negro family was made as the so-called Moynihan report. It hasn't been made public yet, and one of the things it stresses is the very high rate of illegitimacy in Harlem. I don't know, something like 44% of all births last year. And it talks about the difficulty of kids growing up with an absent father, which of course was not your case. You did grow up with a family, a father and mother, and sisters and a brother. Just one brother, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you feel that this is a really crucial problem? I mean, from the way you look at it, say from the way you look at it as a Harlem kid, or do you think that this sort of analysis is misguided and
Tell me something. Why do you think that various government, city and federal government agencies are always so anxious to come up with a report? You know, the people in Harlem don't need any reports.
What do they need?
The people in Harlem need people who are sincerely interested in them as members of the power structure. What they need is genuine representation.
Right.
And this is something which they don't have.
But how do they get it? That's we started talking about that before. How do they get it?
How do they get it? They get it by the power structure, the administration.
Which power
doing
structure
away,
are you talking about now?
The general from the Harlem power structure on up, you know, throughout to the federal, to the top, the federal power structure.
All right.
Yeah.
The White
If they
House
could-
on down.
Yeah, just, you know, go here and study the communities themselves. Don't sit around and give something to some psychologist who knows less about it than they do, actually. He's been sleeping in a book all of his life. They're going to give it to him and say, yeah, tell me about those Negroes. And all he gets is a psychological report that says nothing.
Well, nevertheless, it says something when you're talking about Harlem and you're wondering, for example.
I'll tell you what it says,
Yeah,
Norman. You
tell
know
me
what it says? It says, well, here is the most recent word on the Negro community. And now you can take this and mull over it for another couple years and forget the Negro until that time. That's all it has said. That's all it says today.
Well, you still, though, haven't answered my question, the one I started with. Which is, do you think that this business of illegitimacy, of large numbers of illegitimate kids
is no big problem, really.
Why not?
Because people will look. You give people nothing materially, nothing spiritually. Well, what have they got? They've got instincts and urge. Sex is the most natural thing in the world.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's not a big problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem here that the community isn't that concerned about it. If they're so concerned about what you're saying, actually.
Well, I'm asking. I'm not saying.
You're saying
not yet,
now,
anyway.
wouldn't it be nice if we could get the Negroes to accept what little they have in the ghettos throughout the nation and still not have too many illegitimate children?
Oh, I'm not saying that at all.
Why should the Negroes who've been so deprived in this country for
no,
so long
yeah, no,
worry about the power structures? Disturbance over the high rate of illegitimacy.
Nobody is suggesting that they ought to worry about the power structure's disturbance. The question is whether this is a factor,
that's not the problem. It's merely a symptom of the overall problem, illegitimacy,
Right,
drug addiction.
right.
Why doesn't anybody say anything
well,
about drug addiction?
Yeah, let's talk about drugs.
Yeah.
In the book, drugs are the villain in your book. You say when about 1955 it swept Harlem like a plague, and you, thank God, escaped from it. Why do you think drugs took over in the way they did all of a sudden?
You see, my generation was in almost total rebellion. They were rebelling against the previous generation, our parents. We were rebelling against the power structure. We were rebelling against the adult world. We were rebelling against almost everything, all forms of authority. And it's like drugs came at a time when it gave some substance to our rebellion. If we wanted to say that we were different from our parents who had come from the South and who were happy to work in Goldberg's house and scrub his floors, to work downtown for $40 and $50 a week and think they're doing good. It's like, well, how could we show that we were so different? We were living in the same houses with them. We were accepting the same social and economic conditions as they were accepting. So what made us so different? Well, I'll tell you, one of the most prominent features of our behavior that distinguished us from our parents was the fact that in 1950, when drugs began to pour into Harlem, we went to drugs. We used drugs. We got high off heroin. We nodded, but we were cool. We didn't do like our parents had been doing since the plantation days, getting drunk on Saturday night and going around cutting each other up, hitting each other in the head with axes and meat cleavers and shooting each other. All we did, we got high and we nodded and we became lost in our own selves.
You weren't violent.
And this was
a
a distinguishing feature. That's right.
Yeah.
It was part of the rebellion.
Yeah, and it was a rebellion in this case against violence.
It was
Partly,
no, not
Okay.
so much against violence. Violence was merely a single aspect of our parents' behavior, and it was a rebellion against being identified with our parents. Yeah, to the entire white society. Yeah.
To the entire white society. But you yourself always knew that drugs was bad business. You escaped it from the beginning, and you always knew it was the worst kind of thing. You think that the legalization...
I didn't always know this was the worst kind of thing. I would have been a drug addict had I not had such a traumatic experience
the first time.
in my first attempt
Tell
at
us
getting
about
high off drugs. Well, I thought I was going to die. And so I never went on. But the other two people who tried it with me for the first time, they went on to become drug addicts. And a majority of many people who tried it for the first time, even though they got sick, almost deathly sick, they still went on to become drug addicts.
Well, Claude, some of what you say sort of implies that you're not terribly concerned about the idea or the ideal of integration. Is that true? I mean, that is, do you look forward to a time when whites and Negroes will be living side by side together everywhere with no regard for color, or do you think that that's a less important goal?
Norman, to be realistic, when speaking about integration, look, there's alienation even within ethnic groups. There's
sure
discrimination within ethnic groups. You can't tell some guy who doesn't like drinking, you know, and who doesn't like violence to live next door to a guy who's always getting drunk and beating up his wife. Like, it's the same thing. You can't tell a Negro, like, look, there's some nice white people around, go and live with them, or there's some nice Negroes, go and live with them. I don't think this is really important. If you treated Negroes as fairly as whites were treated in the country, the power structure treated them, that is, there would be no clamor for integration. I don't think Negroes are too anxious to live among white people. They would just like to have the freedom to live wherever they chose.
While you were talking before, I sensed a certain kind of anger in you and a certain kind of bitterness. Have you changed since the book was written, or am I wrong in my reading of the book?
No. You see, I was bitter. It's natural for any Negro to be bitter towards the white society. But as I was coming up, I was releasing all of my bitterness throughout my childhood. That's what my delinquent activities were all about. You know, it was a rebellion.
It was more a rebellion against your parents than against the whites, wasn't it?
No. I stole very little from my parents. They had very little to steal. Yeah, I stole more from the white society.
I mean, you were rebelling against the down home.
I told you, we were rebelling against everything. You know, that's right. You know, from the top on down. Now, what you just said about my lack of bitterness, it's like I can't go around. I could never become a black chauvinist because I've been helped along the way, you know, immensely by white people. It's hard for somebody, like if you're laying down on the ground, dying, you know, and some Negro has stabbed you and laid you down there and left you to bleed, and a lot of other Negroes come by and watch you, you know, and step over you or step on you on the way, and some white man comes and picks you up. How do you say, oh, that no good white man, let me kill him? You've got to be a madman. Yeah, so what do you get the bitterness for?
All I can say is that in about 4 or 8 years, I hope we're going to be seeing you as Congressman Brown.
I hope so too, Norm.
Right.
It's been fun.
So Claude Brown, 1989, almost 25 years after the video you've just seen. And I'm interviewing him for my television series on the 1960s. And I know of the book, and I know the kind of guy he was, and I think he's the same kind of guy, but he's not. He's become something of a philosopher. And he says to me, David, we messed up, my generation. Now, what was surprising about that was that very few people I interviewed, the baby boomers, admitted that they messed up. But he did. We messed up. I said, how, Claude? He said, we grew up with civil rights. We were serious. We knew what we were fighting for. We knew the culture we had come from and what was bad about it and what was good about it. And we did not transmit that to our children. So when he was looking at the young people in 1990, he was saying, they don't have the history and we didn't tell them the history. That was our fault. Not just the history of slavery and the history of racism, but the history of the culture that was needed in order to keep the inner cities together, in order to keep kids off drugs, in order to create alternatives to gangs. He felt that was his and his generation's responsibility. He's passed on now, and I don't have that video interview any longer. So I say this at the end to honor Claude Brown for what he said to me, for his growth as an individual, the uniqueness of his thinking. Thank you, Claude. Thank you, audience.